Okay, so factoring polynomials, your last test for the final exam. So remember, when you're factoring using greatest common factor, you want to look at the coefficients first and see if there are any numerical values that you could factor out. So you'd have to find the greatest common factor of these two coefficients, 21 and 12, which would be 3. That means you could take out a 3, right? And if you take out a 3 of 21, you're left with 7. You didn't do anything with the c, so the c would still be there. And then if you take out a 3 from 12, you'd be left with 4, okay? And as always, especially on your test tomorrow, check your answer and check your work by distributing back. Multiply the 3 times the 7c and 3 times the negative 4. Make sure you get 21c minus 12. Number 2, first we look at the coefficients. So the coefficients in this polynomial are going to be 1 and 8. So it doesn't really help us out with factoring a number component. But we can factor out some variables. So that after we look at the coefficients, we look at the variables next. See if they share any common variables, and they do. They have an x that they both share. One of them has 6 x's and one of them has 2 x's. And then they have a y that they both share. One of them has, actually they both just have 1 y. So we're looking for the greatest amount of x's that we can take out. Okay, now this one has a 6 x's, okay, but that isn't the greatest amount that we could take out. Because if you look at the second monomial, we only have 2 x's in that second monomial. So the greatest amount of x's that we'd be able to take out of this polynomial is 2 x's. So that would be x squared. Okay, how many y's can we take out? Well, each has just 1 y, which means that we could take out 1 y. And what are we left with? We take out 2 x's from x to the 6th power, we'd be left with x to the 4th power. If we take out a y, there would be no more y. It would be x to the 4th power times 1, which is just x to the 4th power. That would be plus 8, and that's it, because we took 2 x's out, and we took y out, so that will get rid of all of those variables that were by the 8. And again, please check your answer by distributing to make sure that you get back to that original polynomial. All right, it looks like we can take out a 15. If we look at the numbers, the greatest common factor of 75 and 30 is 15. So we could take out a 15. After we look at the coefficients, we can move on to the variables. So both of them have an A. Let me get in a different color. Both of them have a B. And only the first one has a C, so we want to be able to factor out a C. How many A's can we take out? Well, that right there tells us. So the variable that has the lowest exponent is the amount of A's that we could take out. So that would be A to the 1st power, so we can only take out 1 A. How many B's can we take out? I hope you can see that we could take out 2 B's. We can't take out any C's. So if we take out all of that stuff out, 75 divided by 15 would be 5. Okay, we take out 1A, so we'd have A left over. Take out 2 B's, so we just have B, and we didn't do anything with the C, so it would just come down. And then if we take out 15 from 30, 30 divided by 15 would be 2. And we took out A, and we took out B squared, so it would just be minus 2. Again, to check your answer, please distribute and make sure you come up with the same polynomial that you started off with. Difference of squared. So remember, when we have 2 terms that we can take the square root of, and we have a difference, then we could use what's called the difference of squared. So remember, when we have a difference of squared, a squared minus b squared, then our answer is going to be a plus b times a minus b, right? And that's the difference of squares. So here we have w squared minus 64. W, we could take the square root of w squared, which would just be w. And we could take the square root of 64, which would just be 8. So our answer would be w plus 8 times w minus 8. And again, check your work by using the FOIL method here. Make sure you get back to w squared minus 64. All right, again, we could take the square root of the first term. We could take the square root of the second term. What's the square root of 9k squared? Well, the square root of 9 is 3. Square root of k squared is k. And then the square root of 1 is 1. So it would be 3k plus 1, 3k minus 1. And again, distribute, use FOIL to see if you come up with the original polynomial that we started off with. And last but not least, again, we could take the square root of both of these terms. Square root of 4m squared would be 2m. And the square root of 81n squared would be 9n, right? And it's not minus, sorry about that. I'm sorry, not plus, it should be minus. That's it. Distribute to check your answer, make sure you come up with the same polynomial that you started off with. I'm sorry, excuse me. All right. Number 7. So when we're factoring a trinomial, we're trying to figure out which two numbers multiply and give us 30, and add and give us negative 13. Okay, so just think of those factors of 30. It's negative 13. Okay, so that means that that we're probably going to have two negative numbers, right? Because we need to multiply and get a positive 30. And the only way we get a positive 30 is either if we multiply two positive numbers or if we multiply two negative numbers. But here's the thing, we had to add and get to negative 13, right? So that's going to take off the positives. So it's going to be two negatives that we are multiplying together to get positive 30. And it would be two negatives that we add together to get negative 13. All right, so 10 and 3. 10 times 3 would be 30, right? And then negative 10 plus negative 3 would be negative 13. So what would this be? This would be p minus 3 and p minus 10, right? And if you go ahead and factor all of these out, you'll see that you get p squared minus 13p plus 30. All right, so this time we have a negative c and a negative b. So in order to multiply, remember, to get c, we have to multiply two numbers together, right? So in order to multiply and end up with a negative, that would mean that you have to multiply a positive and a negative number. So we're looking for a positive and a negative number that will equal negative 3, and that would multiply and give us negative 40. So because the answer is negative 3, that means the number with the bigger absolute value is probably going to be negative, right? Because we're going to wind up with a negative 3 as the b. Okay, so think of some factors of 40. So 4 and 10 won't work, right? Because that would leave you with 6. But what about 8 and 5? Would 8 and 5 work? 8 times 5 is 40, right? And 8 minus 5 is 3. But here's the thing. We want it to be negative 3, so we'd probably want the 8 to be negative. Negative 8 plus 3 would be, I'm sorry, negative 8 plus 5 would be negative 3. Negative 8 times 5 would be negative 40. So your answer would be y minus 8, y plus 5. And we wrote that little trick down in our notes, so make sure you look through your notes to see that little trick that I just mentioned with absolute value and all that garbage. All right, number 9. Left with a positive, C, positive, B. Okay, in order to multiply and get positive as our answer, that means that you either have to have two positives multiplying together or two negatives, right? But our B is positive as well, so that would take out the negative, because if we add two negative numbers, we're not going to end up with the positive. So that means we're looking for two positive numbers that will multiply and give us 36, and that'll add and give us 12. And I think this one's pretty simple. 6 times 6 will give us 36. 6 plus 6 is 12. So I think you can see that this would just be a plus 6 and a plus 6. Or you could write this as a plus 6 squared. And that would be your answer. You could FOIL and distribute it out to make sure that you get the correct answer. Or not the correct answer, make sure you wind up with that trinomial that we started off with. Alright, so when we have a trinomial that has a number that's greater than 1 on the A position, okay, first we're going to see if we can factor something out. Unfortunately, we can't. So then we're going to do a slip and slide method. So slip and slide, remember, we're going to take that A, we're going to multiply it by the C. So that would be x squared plus 10x, and then 3 times 3 is 9, okay? Then we'll go ahead and factor that out. we haven't done the slide part. So if you forgot about slip and slide, look through your notes. First you slip, and the way you slip is you multiply a times c. Then you factor. All right, so I think you could see that it's going to be 9 and 1, right? 9 times 1 would give me positive 9, and 9 plus 1 would give me 10. So it would be x plus 9 and x plus 1. Then you slide. So you slide the original a value, the number that you slipped, you slide it underneath both of your numerical factors in your binomial. Okay? Simplify, reduce to fractions. So 9 divided by 3 would be 3. And if you can't reduce a fraction, right, 1/3 we can't reduce, that's when you go ahead and slide the denominator over in front of the variable. So that would be 3x plus 1, and that's slip and slide. Check your work, distribute. This video hasn't been that long, so I'll go ahead and check my work. X times 3x would be 3x squared. X times 1 would be 3x. I'm sorry, would be x. 3x times 3x would be 9x. And then 3 times 1 would be 3. And if you combine like terms, you end up with 10x plus 3. On your test tomorrow, please check your work. Make sure you end up with the same trinomial. Make sure you didn't do any multiplication errors. I know you guys don't like double checking your work, but it could be the difference between an A and a B, or a B and a C. So make sure you check your work and check for any careless mistakes that you might have made. Slip and slide again. We can't factor anything out, so we are going to slip 12 times negative 2. That would be c squared plus 5c minus 24. Okay? 8 and 3, right? 8 and 3 would give me 24, and 8 minus 3 would give me 5. So that would give me a positive 8 and a negative 3, right? Because 8 times negative 3 would give me negative 24, and 8 minus 3 is 5. Then we slide our original value underneath underneath the two numerical portions of our binomials. Simplify, which we can simplify. The first one would be c plus, and then 8 over 12. We could divide both of those by 4. That would be 2/3. And then your next one would be c minus 1/4. And then we slide the denominators. Slide the denominators, so that'll leave you with 3c plus 2 and 4c minus 1. Check your work. Distribute. Make sure you didn't do anything incorrect. And the last one, we'll have to slip and slide. First, look if you could factor a GCF out. We can't, right? So that's why we're going to go ahead and slip and slide for this problem. So we'll have 4 times 7, which would be 28. So that would leave us with v squared minus 16v plus 28. Okay? So let's think of some things that would multiply and get us 28. So 4 and 7 aren't going to work, right? That won't give us negative 16. But 14 and 2 would give us 28. Now we're looking for a number that would multiply, or two numbers that would multiply and give us a positive, but would add and give us a negative, right? So that means it's going to be two negative numbers. Two negative numbers would multiply and give us a positive. Two negative numbers, when we add them together, would give us a negative response. Okay? And again, we said 14 and 2, so both of those are going to be negative. It would be v minus 14 and v minus 2, because negative 14 times negative 2 would be positive 28, and negative 14 minus 2 would be negative 16. Now we slide that original a value underneath these two variables. Simplify. So the first one would be v minus, and then you could divide both of those by 2, which would be 7 over 2. And the second one would be v minus 1/2. And then you slide. So your answer would be 2v minus 7 and 2v minus 1. Distribute to make sure you did everything correctly. And that's it. 13. Let's do some mixed problems. So this is a binomial, right? So we won't be factoring out a trinomial here. Can we do difference of squares here? No, because even though it is a difference, you can't do the square root of 12, right? That wouldn't give you a whole number as a response, right? But it looks like we can factor out. We could do a greatest common factor here. We could factor out a 12 from each of these, right? So if we take out a 12, all we're left with is x squared minus 1. All right. This is a trinomial. So it looks like before we factor this trinomial out, there is going to be a greatest common factor that we could take out. If we look at all three terms, they all have an n, so we could take out an n. And if we take out an n, we'd be left with n squared minus 4n minus 60, right? And now we could do slip and slide. So we're not slip and slide, this wouldn't be slip and slide, this would just be factoring a trinomial. Our a value is 1. So we're looking for a number that multiplies, or two numbers that multiply together and give us a negative 60, two numbers that add and give us a negative 4. Well, the only way that we could get a negative number when we're multiplying two numbers is if we're multiplying opposite signs, a positive and a negative. Okay, so 6 and 10, right? I hope you can see that 6 and 10 would be the two numbers. Which one would have to be positive? It looks like the 6 would have to be positive because we want to end up with a negative 4. So that's going to be n times n minus 10 and n plus 6. Negative 10 times positive 6 would give me negative 60, and negative 10 plus 6 would give me negative 4. And that's it. Remember that we also originally took out an n, took out the greatest common factor, so we had to include that n to the left of the two parentheses. And if you factor all this out, you'll see that you end up with the answer that you originally started with. All right. Next, we have 8m squared minus 21. We can't do difference of squares here yet because you can't do the square root of 21 or the square root of 8, right? It looks like, I mean, the only factors of 8 are 1, 2, 4, and 8. And you can't divide 21 by any of those numbers. Okay, so we wouldn't be able to take out any of those numbers. So it looks like this one's just going to be prime. There's absolutely nothing we could do with this one. It's just going to be prime. Okay, so we're not going to do slip and slide yet because looks like we could factor something out. So remember, first look for your GCF, and the GCF happens to be 5. You could take a 5 out. So if we take a 5 out, 5, that would leave us with w squared minus 3w minus 4. Now, looks like we have a negative 4, so we need to find two numbers that multiply and give us negative 4. That tells me that we're either going to have, because it's negative 4, that means we're going to have a positive and a negative. We have a negative 3 here, so that means the absolute value of the negative number is going to be bigger. So 4 and 1, right? Because negative 4 times 1 would give me negative 4, and then negative 4 plus 1 would give me negative 3. So this one would be 5w minus 4, w minus plus 1, sorry. And that would give me a negative 4 here and a negative 3 for my b value. Remember, we took the GCF out. Make sure you bring that back down. Now we have 8v minus 98v to the third power. So it looks like we could take a 2 out and a v, right? And that would leave us with 4 minus 49v squared. And now we could do the difference of squares here. So this would be 2v on the outside, and then 2 plus 7v, and then 2 minus 7v. And that would be it. Check it using FOIL. If you want to double check your work, always recommend it on the test. Alright, now we have 4x squared minus 10x plus 4. It looks like our GCF is going to be 2. We can take out a 2 before we start working on this. If we take out a 2, we'd be left with 2x squared minus 5x plus 2. Now we still have a number in front of that x squared. We still have a number in the a position, so we're going to do this slip and slide. We're going to slip this 2 over here, and that'll make it 2 times x squared minus 5x plus 4. Now we'll factor. Okay, so that factors to, let's see, 4 and 1, right? Negative 4 and negative 1. So x minus 4, x minus 1. That would multiply and give me a positive 4. And then we add those together, and that'd give me a negative 5. But remember, this slip and slide technique, we had to bring back our 2 that we originally slipped. So bring it back and divide it by each of the numerical terms in your binomial. And that'll leave you with, I'm going to move this up here, because I'm running out of space, 2 times x. Remember, you reduce your fractions if you can, and you can reduce that first one. That would be x minus 2. And then you can't reduce the second one, right? The second one's x minus 1/2. You can't reduce that. So that's where the sliding comes in. You slide that 2 in front of your x, and that will leave you with 2x minus 1. That's your answer. FOIL, multiply, distribute, check your answer, especially on your test tomorrow. Ooh, we're already at 20 minutes. I'm very, very sorry. So this one, it looks like we could first look at your numbers. We have some greatest common factors we could take out. We could take out a 3, an A, and a B. Now I'm going to do these last 3 a little quicker because we're already at 20 minutes. If we take out a 3 from 27, we're left with 9, and then the A's and B's will obviously also go out. And then if we take out a 3 from 75, we are left with 25, and then one of the A's vanishes, and one of the B's vanishes, so it would be left with B squared. Now we could do difference of squares, so that would be 3AB. If you're still confused with difference of squares, then watch some of the previous examples, but I'm going to do the rest of these a little more rapidly just so that we don't go to that 30-minute mark, because I'm sure you guys would love that if I went to 30 minutes. All right, next one. So 12y squared minus 16y minus 16. First factor, greatest common factor out. Looks like the greatest common factor would be 4 of this. We could take out a 4, and that would leave us with 3y squared minus 4y minus 4. Okay, and now we'll do the slip and slide. So we slip the 3 over to the 4, and that'll leave us with y squared minus 4y minus 12. Now we factor. So that would be 6 and 2, right? So it would be y plus 6, nope, minus 6, sorry. Y minus 6 and y plus 2. That would multiply and give me negative 12 and add and give me negative 4. Now we now we divide by that original number that we slipped. And if that still confuses you, there's another example where I went a little slower. So that would be y minus 2. And then because we can't reduce this, we're going to slide that to the front. So that would be 3y plus 2 would be your answer. And last one, 3h squared minus 6h plus 3. Looks like we could factor out a 3. If we factor out a 3, we'll be left with h squared minus 2h plus 1. Okay, then we have a positive 1 here, negative 2, so that means that we're going to be subtracting by 1. Okay, because that would give me a positive 1, and if we add those together, it would give me a negative 2. And that is your answer, or you could have this as this as well. Either way, that's your answer. 23 minutes. Whew, I'm very sorry. But hopefully this study guide helped you out and prepared you for your test tomorrow. Oh, and I also wanted to talk about one more thing. I almost forgot. Your test is also going to have grouping, which is when we have 4 terms. And you guys did really well on this in class, so hopefully this isn't going to be an issue. But remember, more grouping, which is separate up to 2 binomials and group the first 2. But the first binomial, it looks like we could take out an x squared, right? And that would leave us with x plus 3. And the next one looks like we could take out an 8, and that'll leave us with x plus 3. And then remember, then you just factor out the x plus 3. So that would be x plus 3 times x squared plus 8. That's also going to be on your test. Look over your notes on that one. Ooh, almost 25 minutes. I'm very sorry. Have a great day. See you tomorrow.